So I guess I always challenge people, are you babying her, or are you meeting her needs, or are you flat out setting her up for failure?
Hey, I'm Shaye Wanner, and you are listening to the Casual Cattle Conversations podcast. Whether you are a seasoned rancher or just curious about the cattle world, this podcast dives into the stories, science, and strategies shaping the future of ranching. Let's get started and keep your herd ahead of the herd. Alrighty, folks, today we are visiting with Karla Wilke about nutrition requirements for upcoming 3-year-olds. So Karla explains why this group of cows has different energy requirements, what practical management tips ranchers can implement in good years and dry years to make sure that they're setting this group of young cows up for success. It's kind of a quick and informative episode that I think you'll really enjoy. Now, before we dive into this, remember the best way to support this podcast and your other favorite podcasts is to share your favorite episodes with a friend and leave a rating or review. With that, let's visit with Karla. Increased profitability and informed management decisions go hand in hand. Herd Dog is a data analytics company that makes it possible for cattle producers to collect herd information efficiently. Their smart ear tag monitors cattle 24/7. Think of it as a Fitbit for cattle. Herd Dog fits the needs of a variety of operations as it finds sick animals days before humans can detect illness and can identify which cows are in heat. Best of all, the tags have high visibility lights to help you sort out which cattle you are looking for. Head to their website, which is linked in the show notes, or contact them for a consultation to see how Herd Dog can work for you. Herd Dog is spelled HERDDOGG. All right, well, good morning, Karla. It is fun to have you on the show. I'm excited to talk about this topic. Yet again, a important topic that I haven't covered on the show yet. So I've covered it a little bit, but maybe not as much as I should because it is very important. So I'm excited to talk with you today about how producers can kind of help those second-calvers chase that second calf and have more successful pregnancies out of that age group of cows. So before we dive into the topic at hand, the question I always like to ask everyone is, why do you choose the beef industry each day?
I love the beef industry for 2 reasons. One being that cattle to me are the most amazing creatures. They get a bad rap for being bad for the environment when in fact they are fantastic for the environment. They are the ultimate upcyclers. They can take byproducts and waste products like distillers grains, which is a byproduct of the ethanol industry, or cannery waste, the leftover pieces of vegetables and stuff that don't go into human consumption, or human consumption crops that should just go to a landfill or something. They're not good enough for human consumption. They can take any of those and use them, and they recycle them to make them into a product that humans can consume, through beef that is very nutrient dense. And so that's one reason. The other reason is the people in the industry. Everybody I meet in the beef industry is just doing their darndest to make a good living and put together a good product that consumers want. They're trying to be trustworthy and transparent, and I just appreciate being able to be around those people.
And can you tell listeners a little bit about what you do today as far as your career?
So I am the cow-calf and stocker management specialist for the University of Nebraska, and I'm located out in the Panhandle, which is the western edge of the state. So I'm 400 miles from campus, but the University of Nebraska feels like it's very important that they place people throughout the state to help assist producers with questions that they have, to have research-based knowledge to help them make their decisions, management decisions. The state is very diversified in its environment and its resources, and so they just think it's very important to place specialists throughout the state that can do research and answer questions more specific to a region, and not everything come out of Lincoln that might not really fit. And so that's what I do, and I've been there 15 years, and I conduct research on production cows and stocker cattle, and then try to help producers with ration balancing and management decisions that are research-based. Then on the side, my husband and I have integrated crops and livestock operation that we do.
Awesome. So from your perspective, why is it so important that ranchers pay special attention to these upcoming Second-Calvers or trying to get that first calf heifer bred again?
So that is what we would refer to as a high-risk female. She is one that we tend to have a lot more opens in coming around that second time than the rest of the cow herd. And I guess one of the reasons that that's really important, it's something that I push with producers, is that there's a lot of money and time invested in developing or buying bred heifer that someone else developed. And if she comes up open with that second calf, then the depreciation on that cow is quite expensive. And so in today's market, if they're paying $3,000 for her, and then as a cull cow she's $1,400, then that's $1,600 worth of depreciation in that heifer. And calves this week in Ogallala, weaned calves, steer calves were selling, 600-pound calves were selling for $2,100, and heifers were just right behind them, $19. And so to have her not come up with a calf for you to sell that fall, that's a huge loss. And then the depreciation loss of her is a lot right now.
Absolutely. So can you give a little bit of a refresher to the listeners out there as far as why this group of cows has different needs than, say, the younger group and even the mature cows ahead of them?
So what makes that coming 3-year-old a high-risk female for us? So the issue with her is that, let me just describe for you a little bit, regardless of whether it's a mature cow or a heifer or a 2-year-old, they're going to have a hierarchy of needs. And so we have our basal metabolism needs, just to breathe and to sit here and have metabolic functions. And we have to have nutrients to make those things happen, as do those cows. And they have an order of importance for when nutrients are going to be partitioned to what functions. So, we're going to start with the metabolic needs. We've got growth in there. We have lactation, if she's already had a baby and now she's nursing that baby. And way down on the bottom of her list is to start cycling again and maintain another pregnancy. That tends to be on our list higher up. But for her, she can only meet that need and partition nutrients to that need if these other needs have been met first. So the problem can be that either we are short on those nutrients for her to partition, so there's just not enough of them to go around, or we have created an animal that has higher requirements than we have nutrients to put in those buckets, if you will, And with that, coming 3-year-old and her trying to get bred with that second baby, what a lot of people forget, I think there's 2 things that people forget related to her. One is that if you look at, basal metabolism and growth and lactation, all those things, the first calf heifer, the one that's never had a baby, the one you're trying to get bred for the very first time, she has that basal metabolism and she has growth, but she doesn't have lactation. So you literally take an entire bucket that has to be filled out of the equation for her, and then she has to cycle and get bred. Okay. If you take a mature cow over 5 years old or whatever, your running age cows that are the queens of your herd, she's got basal metabolism, she's got lactation, she doesn't have growth. So she doesn't have a bucket to fill. But then you take that 2-year-old who's coming 3, who has a new baby, first time ever, she's got her basal metabolism, she's still got quite a bit of growth to do, and she's now got lactation on top of that, and you want her to rebreed. So she's at a disadvantage because she has one more bucket to fill than either of her younger sisters or her older sisters. And sometimes we forget about that. The other thing I think that we sometimes don't realize is just how big the lactation bucket is for their energy needs. And so we kind of short those cows sometimes. We may short all the cows if we're not, if we have more need for lactation than we actually have resources to give them. But it hurts that cow more because she has so many other requirements, if that makes sense.
Are you feeling stuck with your podcast? Are you putting in endless effort only to feel like you're spinning your wheels? It's time for a breakthrough. Join myself and Krista Paffrath for the Podcast Refresh Workshop. This is a transformative 3-day virtual event designed for podcasters in the rural, western, and agriculture spaces. You'll discover how to reignite your purpose and create content that resonates, streamline your workflow for less stress and more impact, promote confidently to grow your audience, monetize effectively and turn your passion into a profit. We do all this with large group discussions, small breakouts, personalized guidance, and you're going to leave with a clear strategy and blueprint to give you the excitement and resources to thrive in 2025. It's time to refresh, refocus, and feel inspired about podcasting again. You can join us today using the link in the show notes. So you made the comment that, it could either be because we're not providing the nutrients or that we've created females that are requiring extra nutrients than our environment can provide. What are some things ranchers can be aware of when they're selecting females to make sure that, or at least try to have their energy requirements fit their environment?
That kind of goes back to a comment, and I think we had maybe talked about this a little bit earlier when we weren't online, but that comment that sometimes you hear people say that they're not going to baby their heifers, that they have to make it in their environment. And so I guess I always challenge people, are you babying her, or are you meeting her needs, or are you flat out setting her up for failure? Because you're not accounting for the fact that she has one more bucket to be filled than everybody else. But then are you setting her up for failure because when you are selecting bulls that then their daughters are going to be these upcoming heifers, are you selecting for bulls that are going to put too much milk production in their daughters for the environment that you have? Is the quality of hay that you can get in your operation lower, and therefore you need more supplement, but you're not willing to pay for that supplement? So then that puts this particular heifer at more risk because you've either created her to have too much milk production, or another thing that happens to us sometimes is we continually select bulls that put more weaning weight, more genetic potential, regardless of milk production, into our herd. So is the average mature body weight of our herd slowly creeping up? And so therefore that maintenance bucket that we talked about that they have to fill first takes more out of what we have to offer her. So therefore there's less available when we get down to rebreeding. So those are unintended consequences of some decisions that we make sometimes. That I'm not saying everybody does that. I'm saying that's something we need to be cognizant that can happen to us, and make sure that in fact the female we are developing or creating does fit the environment that we have.
So in your mind, what does it look like to simply meet the needs of, or to be able to fill each bucket for that coming 3-year-old compared to babying them? Where is the line in that?
So I think the line is knowing the requirements, the protein, energy, vitamins, and minerals requirement for that heifer based on the NRC requirements that are put together that are based on research. And so first off, making sure that what she is requiring is actually what we're able to provide for her. And that amount of supplement depends on the quality of your base diet, that kind of thing. And so I can't just give you a number and say, well, she has to have this, because you may have Simmental cross heifers, you may be having Hereford Red Angus cross, and those have different maturity rates and those kinds of things. But working with a nutritionist in an extension or something can help you figure out what those needs are, and then making sure that we're providing that. The other thing that we can do from a management standpoint, regardless of what heifers you're running is to understand that she has a small rumen and smaller than a mature cow. So she's going to need higher quality feeds that have a little greater digestibility and a little more passage rate through, so that she can take in more nutrients that she needs, where a mature cow can handle a lot, lower quality feeds and eat a lot more of it, because her capacity to hold it is more and her needs are less. The other thing to keep in mind is that if we run those heifers with those big old cows that are bossy and have a big old rumen with lots of capacity, and they can eat all that feed really quick, and then that heifer needs to eat a small amount but then come back later and eat some more, and it's not there because we ran her with a big cow who took it all, then we've kind of set her up for some failure. So simple management things like making sure our heifers are in a different pen or pasture, they're not competing with those big cows, it can help her tremendously. Another thing that we need to keep in mind is that she's already got a smaller rumen, and then by the time that calf gets to that last month of gestation, he's taken up a lot of room, right? So now the capacity that she has a little less of. And this is about the time that she's just about to go into lactation. So we really don't need her to be losing weight before she even gets to lactation. And what some research has shown is that she actually loses body condition. She can, if we're not careful, but we're not going to really notice a body weight loss because all that fetal growth is probably a pound a day at this point. And so she doesn't look like she's losing it, but she's losing her own, fat reserves. Then she goes into lactation, she starts to lose those fat reserves a lot more because that is such a demand. And then if we get her down into a body condition score below a 5 during that lactation, she's probably going to have a hard time, even if we're going to green grass before we put the bulls in. She's probably gotten down pretty low, and she's going to struggle to get back up there enough to rebreed. And so if we can be cognizant enough to keep her in a body condition score 6 when she calves, and because knowing that she's probably going to lose a little bit in lactation, and a lot of times in a spring calving herd, we don't have a great quality feed for them at that point. And so she may lose a little, but we've got to give her enough cushion that she's not so far down that she's like, don't have any reserves.
So where in the timeline should producers start with making sure there's that cushion? Is that, just even starting with them as replacement heifers before their first breeding season? I mean, where in your mind do producers need to be the most proactive to make sure that they're not trying to make up for a lost body condition score?
Yeah, and that you bring up an interesting point on the heifer, because there's two schools of thought on the developing the heifer. Some say, we can develop heifers to only 55% mature body weight, and they'll still breed that first time, and we don't need to put expense into them. There's other schools of thought that say, well, if we'll get about 1.5 pounds target gain on that heifer from the time she's weaned to the time she goes, to breeding, we'll have 65-70% of mature body weight, that would be better. Some of that research, what they do is when they do protocols for artificial insemination, they jumpstart those heifers that haven't started cycling. And so they've masked some of that, who's really cycling already and who's not. So then they say, well, we didn't get any differences here in the first round. I don't know that there's a huge percentage of producers who actually do AI, their heifers. I know some do, but there's a lot there's a lot of cows out there that are still bull bred. And so that is one thing that I am looking at with some research now, is some development protocols, strategies for the weaned heifer. And then we're not going to do hormones, to AI and stuff, because I don't want to jumpstart them. I want to see where they are and how they do. The other thought to that is following them through to that next calf and seeing, did any of those developmental regimes that we used help them because they were closer to mature body weight and they didn't have as much growth then during that time frame that they're trying to get bred with the second calf, did that help them, or does that not make a difference? So that's one thing that you brought up that would be something interesting to look at. The other is really monitoring that bred heifer who is about to calve. Say she's a March calver and we're in January. Now would be a really good time to be assessing her body condition score and seeing where she is, and trying to make sure that we increase supplement a little bit to keep her in, or get her into a 6, knowing that as soon as that baby's born and lactation starts, that it's going to start a drain on her. And so if she's only in a 5 when she calves and she loses a body condition score by the time she goes to the bull in June or whatever, that's too much. So now is a good time to be assessing that, and it's important that we meet her needs during lactation and not drain her so bad, but it's a whole lot easier right now to keep her from losing body condition now than it is to try to put it back on her once lactation starts, if we don't have the feed resources to do that. And I guess that's what we're talking about, right? Is that people maybe have hay to feed, maybe they have to bring in some protein cake or whatever. They're not in an area where they can just pour the energy feeds to them. Okay, well that's because that's what they're saying, right? I can't baby this heifer. Okay, well we don't have to baby her, but let's try not to set her up for failure.
So you already brought up how one management practice that you see as effective is keeping those younger cows away from the mature cows so that they have a fair chance at getting the nutrients they need and the feed they need. There's less competition. What other management practices do you view as effective, or have you seen other ranchers implement?
A lot of times they'll try to get their hays tested, use the hay probe or whatever, send in a sample, have an idea which hays are better quality than the others, and save some of that better feed for that heifer that is going to have the better quality feed, the higher passage rate, that kind of thing. Increasing her supplement compared to what you would feed the cow is helpful too, because she obviously has a higher nutrient density need, not necessarily more overall feed. It's just the quality of it. And so making sure that you have that set up is really helpful too.
So Karla, all of this is very good and it sounds simple when, we have a good year, but the reality is so many producers have been experiencing drought over the past few years, and drought is inevitable. It's going to come and impact everyone at some point. So how can producers who are retaining their own females still make sure they're meeting the needs of these heifers and young cows, even through drought?
So you bring up a really good point, in that if we have drought, a lot of times what our recommendation for managing the pastures for drought is that we delay turnout, because either the grass is going to be slow to grow or has been slow, just whatever related to drought. A lot of times that's an issue. And looking at the drought monitor map that has come out already, for January, halfway through January, so there's probably 2 of those that have been updated for this year, is showing a lot of drought or dry already across a big chunk of our mama cow production region of the Great Plains. Okay, so it's very possible that we could be looking at delaying turnout or a shortage of grass. So one thing that happens to producers sometimes is, in an attempt to not overgraze their pastures, they're holding those cows in after they've calved longer, and so that interval between calving and going to green grass gets lengthened. And we've already said that probably if we're feeding hay and a little supplement, that we're probably not quite meeting her need for lactation, but we're depending on the fact that we're banking on her having some body condition through the winter that she can then use during that period until she can get to green grass. And we're talking how we don't want her to lose a whole condition score there, but if she does, we don't want her to be below a 5. Well, if we're delayed turnout and we keep holding her, she's going to continue to lose that weight. And so that can put this young cow in a very perilous position for then rebreeding on time, because now she may be increasing her body condition once she goes to the green grass, but it may not be enough for her to have, because now it's kind of like credit card debt. Now, not only is she paying for the things that she's buying right now, she's paying for the things that she did a month ago. And in the heifer's case, since she's not out buying Gucci purses or whatever, is that she has got to eat enough to meet her nutrient needs for now, which are high because of lactation and growth. But now she's also got to make up that lost body condition, okay? She's got to have enough reserves to sustain herself. That cycling thing and getting rebred again is the last thing on her metabolic mind, okay? And now she's behind, and now we have less to give her. So what are we going to do about that? We are going to have to go back up to now, January, and start thinking about, I can't let these be too thin now because I may really be in a pickle later. So increasing supplementation now to make sure those heifers are at least in a body condition score 6. And then what are some feed resources that I could lay in for that period between when she calves and when we can actually go to grass, assuming that might be delayed. So, what are some things I can do there? Are there some older cows that I could cull to save resources for the younger core herd? Start making thought processes on that in January, hoping we don't have to do those things, but there's nothing worse than getting up to that point and having to do something you weren't prepared to do.
Karla, as we kind of wrap up today, if there's one thing you could change about the ranching industry, what would that be?
I guess probably my biggest frustration with it is that we all get a lot of pressure to make management changes or to do things different by people and groups that aren't actually doing it. And so I wish that we had more trust from those outside looking in, but maybe that's every industry, that there's always somebody trying to tell you what to do that isn't doing it. I mean, that happens with parenting, right? There's always somebody that wants to give you parenting advice that doesn't have kids or whatever. So I think that's maybe with everything. But to be honest, I wake up every day excited to go out and feed, excited to do some research that might help producers, excited to watch my own calves grow, and I cannot think of a better life. And so, with the exception of some little irritating things here and there, I don't think I'd change a thing.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining me on the show today. For those of you who are interested in maybe connecting with Karla or any of maybe some articles or research she's done, I can link some of that in the show notes. But with that, happy ranching, folks.